Good morning, Jess. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm
I'm
excited. We're
I'm
doing
excited
something
too.
different
Yeah.
today.
Yeah, this is wild. We haven't done this yet before. We
Yeah.
we're, we're having a guest on the podcast today. Yeah,
Woohoo.
our good friend Lea Dawn. Yeah,
Hi,
we're
guys.
Hi,
hi.
Leah.
I realized when we said yes that now that we're doing this, we don't have like a catchy opening. A lot of podcasts have like a catchy opening where there's like a catchphrase that they say every time, like waka waka waka, ask Jess and Dave, don't be a slave to your relationship dynamics. And we don't have anything like that.
We don't, right? Or,
Can I suggest one?
Yeah, for
oh, of
sure.
course.
Oh yeah.
Well, with all the wisdom bombs you guys have dropped on the show so far, by
Mm,
far my favorite
Mm,
was when Dave said, ass is great.
ass is great.
yes.
That's says it all. I
There you
love
go.
I
who
chortled at that one.
who doesn't?
Right.
Who doesn't?
Pretty universal. I mean,
Indeed, indeed. Well, we're so
Okay.
glad you're here. This is so cool. This is our eighth episode, and we're just chomping at the bit to get into the content today. But before we start, I want to introduce you, Leah, to the people that don't know who you are, because you've got a really cool bio. So I'm going to read that now, and then we can get into today's topic. So our guest today is Lea Dawn. She is a trauma-informed relationship and marriage coach, international speaker, author, and workshop facilitator. She specializes in challenging scenarios, including high conflict relationships, shame-free infidelity repair. Can't wait to dive into that. Supporting public figures in attachment style conflict. Her heart's mission is to help people learn the skills they were never taught by parents or schools to create and sustain secure, fulfilling, and empowered relationships.
I love
She
it.
synthesized the science and wisdom of the Gottman method, traumatology, polyvagal theory, attachment theory, and somatics in her signature frameworks, the trauma tree, and the rock solid relationship blueprint.
Mm. Everyone is in for a treat.
sounds so fancy. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So,
good.
for our listeners, today's topic in question is on infidelity, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But you have become an expert in infidelity, so that's sort of where we were like, you reached out to us. We're like, yes, let's bring Leah in. We need her for some of these questions. So, when we first met, it was late 2020, early 2021, I think, and you actually had me as, a relationship expert on your what you were doing at that time. And so you were helping monogamous couples open up into polyamory. And
Mhm.
now your work has switched to helping couples stay monogamous
Yep.
after infidelity. So just walk us through there to here. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, I won't go into the gory details, which you guys know already, but coaching started out in a very niche field.
Hmm.
I wouldn't even say just monogamous couples trying to open, although we definitely did a lot of that, but just also people who had been even in the open field for a while and were struggling.
Yeah.
And obviously, I resonated a lot with that and started writing about it. And we started this support group on Facebook. And we found that people were also struggling. I kind of thought I was the only one, like everyone else had that figured out
Leah, you're the only one on the planet struggling with
ever,
polyamory.
ever. And so I was amazed by the response that we got from people who really wanted it, but just couldn't sink into it like a puzzle piece that felt like they were in the wrong puzzle. And when we came across your book, it's not an understatement that my life changed because I was already beginning to understand attachment theory and realize that the whole lifetime of strange behaviors and relationship problems I had ever experienced could be traced back to that. It
Mhm.
was a landmark moment. And so what your book, Polysecure, really did for the field, which I think is why it's like a runaway meme at this point, is not only that it, spoke very uniquely to a subgenre of relationship that I think a lot of people felt stigmatized to struggle in. That's what I had found. Like a stigmatized relationship structure that other people were feeling stigmatized to be struggling inside
Yeah.
of, which is wild. And so, but I think what really made it huge was not a lot of books had actually intersected attachment and trauma as well, and had such a clear, approachable, accessible way of understanding these two kind of not yet that known fields. And I do think your book has played a huge role in bringing that more into the mainstream. And so I know that all of us had interacted throughout those years with interviews that we did with you and our group. And, we've stayed friends since, which has been great. But I actually exited that world a few years ago, a bit unceremoniously, but lots of healing later. We actually created a coaching team that specializes first was in helping people with open relating, but then actually we realized there's a much, much bigger market for monogamous couples who ended up non-consensually monogamous and want help going back to that. And I felt just a lot more in my wheelhouse there because that is, I would say, my orientation. But I do have to say that my experience and coaching a lot of people on the other side gave me a very specific set of skills, to quote Liam Neeson, but a very interesting lens for looking at infidelity really as a de-shaming process and much more a portal to healing than, a way to send you back to church and atone for your sins and hope and pray for the best that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
So now we have a totally different approach. And I love it because now I'm seeing people actually start to become the best version of themselves in a relationship where the number one question I'll ask a couple when they're really stuck and it's been months and they're just struggling, and I'll ask, what would your relationship look like right now if this had not come out? Would you like to go back to that? And they kind of stare at me stunned, like, no, 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 because really no one was happy at that point, at least the ones I've worked with.
Yeah, there's an interesting parallel there because that's similar with non-monogamy, with people that are really struggling with it. But you also ask them like, oh, would you go back? And I think there's something about both infidelity and non-monogamy that like blows the doors open on a relationship. And really just there's so much now more honesty and transparency, and it's hard. But people on some level prefer that level of intimacy that opens up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Before we get too far into the conversation, I really want to get to our questions so that we can really
Yeah.
sculpt and
All
direct
right.
where we go because there's so much to say.
There is so much to say. And like I said, I actually have two questions. They're connected. So we'll start with the first though. So, dear Jess and Dave, and now Leah, my wife and I have been together 15 years, married for 11. 6 months ago, I found out she'd been having an affair with a coworker for almost a year. I was devastated. But after a lot of hard conversations, we both decided we want to stay together and rebuild. Where it gets challenging for me is that she doesn't want to stop seeing the other person. She says the affair made her realize she wants an open relationship, she's asked if we can restructure our relationship instead of ending things with them. I've never been against non-monogamy in theory, but this feels different and tricky, like I'm being asked to bless the betrayal instead of heal from it. So my questions are, what does the process of healing from infidelity actually look like? And is it even possible to do that work while my wife is still actively dating her coworker? Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
you just went right for like the hardest question. Wow.
Yeah, it was funny. I
Yeah,
read it
we
to
don't fuck
Dave.
around. If we're gonna have
Right.
you
I
on,
read
we're
it to
gonna go
Dave
right
earlier
for
and
it.
he was like, wow. And I was like, this is like my case every other week at this point.
This requires a fourth caffeine pill that I don't. So would you like me to
Yeah,
go for it
let's
or?
start with what does the process of healing infidelity actually look like? Let's us all take a go at that, but we'll start with you, Leah.
Okay. So I would imagine there's a few different approaches to this, but the one I've adopted is the Dr. John Gottman Trust Revival method, which is a three-phase method that divides a number of healing and repair tasks into three phases. And the first phase is atonement. The second phase is attunement. The third phase is attachment.
Give
Favorite
me
subject.
three. I love alliterations.
I'm like, oh, that is so good. So the bulk of the work that our couples do is in phase one. Atonement is a delicate, careful, painstaking process. It's painful. It's the phase where most of our couples fall into all kinds of bear traps and make all kinds of mistakes. And by the time they come to me, they've often made a whole bunch of mistakes already that we then have to go back and undo and then actually set the proper template. And I actually have to kind of train the unfaithful partner to be a sort of pillar of healing throughout this process and lead the process. They made the choice. They should lead through the recovery, which is interesting because what the tasks of the first phase are designed to address, they naturally kind of address a lot of the patterns that actually led to the infidelity in the first place. And so after working with, I don't know, like at least 150 couples now in the last year or so, I've noticed a certain set of parts, which I'm sure we'll get into.
We will,
This is
yeah.
an IFS show. A certain set of parts that tend to show up at the scene of all of these crimes. And the number one common one that I find is conflict avoidance. At some point, conflict avoidance kicked in and started letting parts of a person tell them all kinds of stories and truths. It's a group of parts I'll call the misinformation mafia, which I can get into later.
Love that.
And they,
Another alliteration.
there you go. Well, wait till you hear my three-phase process. And so the atonement process is designed to counteract that. Whereas the number one pattern where the unfaithful partner tends to want to retreat and avoid this process and kind of let their hurt partner drive, we're like, no, 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 no. This is your time actually to get over that, move through it. And we work to heal it together. And so a lot of those steps, we go through a very specific checklist of steps like demonstrating relentless remorse, reassurance, and amends, a full confession, openly fielding questions, a fair discussion, making a strong case for why the unfaithful partner wants back in, because the hurt partner's like, if you had that, why do you want this? So there's a number of steps that I take them through. The tricky part of this one is in standard repair science, there is the completion of an affair. The idea is it is extremely difficult to heal if that channel of betrayal continues and there's continuous contact, because now that person represents an emotional trauma and is going to create all kinds of traumatic associations, and it's going to be difficult not to keep reenacting that for a partner in that situation. So for the most part, that happens with my clients as they've completed. They actually realize they really don't want to continue that. In this particular case, the hurt partner has to decide if they're really willing to lean into the idea of letting that requirement go and really leaning hard into all of the other healing steps where like the unfaithful partner has to nail it with all the other parts, because they basically have to prove they're trustworthy while seeing the person who inspired them to break their trust. It's a tall order for someone who's been hurt by this.
Yeah.
And the unfaithful partner has to acknowledge that, has to acknowledge, I am the reason why you are having these intrusive thoughts. I am the reason why this person really triggers you. I am the reason you don't trust me. They have to relentlessly acknowledge the impact that their choices had, because infidelity is considered the most traumatic relational experience a monogamous person can go through, right? Whether we
Yeah.
like that or not, you know.
Yeah. I want to jump in. I love that
Go ahead.
concept of relentless remorse. And it really reminds me of the work that I was doing in the field of restorative justice. And there was sort of an evolution of the nomenclature that existed. But when you had parties come into a restorative relationship, excuse me, a restorative justice process, back in the day, it used to be, and I don't know how it is for all the organizations, but originally the organization I was working with was you had the offender and the victim. And then we realized the titles themselves carried some pretty unsavory
They're pretty weighty.
connotations, right? And so the evolution of those concepts was then the harmed party and the responsible individual or individuals, which I
Ooh,
liked.
okay.
I like the evolution of that terminology because it created more sense of agency, less stigma, less shame, and invited more accountability. But it was a really interesting process because it had to be really driven by the willingness of the responsible individual in the same way that you're saying. It can't be the onus of repair is put onto the harmed party. And that's
Mhm.
a danger that we'd have to navigate very skillfully and faithfully for a restorative process to really work. So I
Mm.
love that that's up front and foregrounded in your process. I think the interesting thing and the thing I'm really curious about weaving through our conversation today is how do you help on a practical level the responsible individual really take that kind of accountability, lean into that kind of process without collapsing into shame, right? And needing to defend their sense of self.
Mhm.
I also want to back up just a little bit because you said that when people come to you, they have made all these mistakes already, probably in the conversations they've been having about the cheating before they even go get help. I'm sure I'm not the only one that's curious. Like, yeah, what are people doing that sort of they wind up shooting themselves in the foot or they're making it worse for each other that then you're like, there's so many layers here that you're having to sort through.
I love this question. People love like biggest mistake thingies.
Right.
So there's a blog post I can actually share with your audience after this called How to Lose Your Hurt Partner in 10 Days After an Affair, kind of off the movie, How to
Right,
Lose
that
a Guy in 10
movie.
Days. So there are definitely mistakes that actually happen on both sides. I will
Yeah,
say that.
right.
Because again, this represents a peak in nervous system dysregulation. This may be the most dysregulated they've ever been in their entire life, even,
Hmm.
but definitely their relationship. So, again, a lot of the patterns, what Dr. Gottman calls enduring vulnerabilities, the pre existing traumas, patterns, I call it CTAP, childhood trauma and adverse programming. For me,
Mhm.
are the forces that shape a person as an adult, shapes their behavior. All of that peaks in the aftermath of this
Mm.
coming out. And so, there's things like trickle truth is one of the most dastardly dynamics that happens in the aftermath.
Mm.
A person finds out, they even have proof, they confront their partner, and the partner wholly denies it,
It's the worst.
keeps lying about it, or, they keep. And what's amazing to me is one of the mistruths that the misinformation mafia tells the unfaithful partner is, well, now that's all they're going to know, so they're not going to know this next thing. Well, they won't know this next thing. I shouldn't say this next thing. And it's like, are we not seeing at this point that there's a good chance everything is coming out now?
Yeah.
And so, but they're just convinced that then it's the next thing that will kill the relationship or make their partner walk away. And so they trickled this out. And what they don't realize is every single time they're caught, it sets back the trust rebuilding clock
Yeah.
immensely. Big, big problem.
Mm.
The other one with the involved partner, I have to train them a lot in is defensiveness. All of a sudden now, this is the first time they're expressing how unhappy they were in the
Right.
marriage or how little they felt loved and or you don't have enough sex with me. And they start pinning the affair on the hurt partner as their fault. And now we're totally in line with your approach on restorative justice. In fact, it's inspired a lot of my journey of our process. The idea is there a shared responsibility we'll have to look at some point to rebuild a better relationship? Yeah. Are you allowed to pin this on your partner if you never really expressed yourself, or even if you did, you never saw through or gave them a really important choice? Like, I am so unhappy, I'm at risk for an affair. So we have choices to make right now. That has never happened in the history of humanity, because a person, that's too hard. And people generally like to avoid hard things. And so they'll push the easy button, which is what an affair is.
Yeah.
So that's on the involved partner side. Then on the hurt partner side, definitely some of the patterns that were probably contributing peak here as well. If they were already critical or tended to be very hard on their partner, which may have influenced their partner to withdraw and turn away, this comes out like a dragon.
It's
like
a dragon.
screaming, yelling, histrionics, which again, it's understandable considering
Yeah.
how we've been programmed by monogamy narrative to take this so hard. You know, we've been trained to do that. But they often don't realize that they're like henpecking and trying to pull everything out of their partner, but they have no concept of relational safety or the nervous system. And they don't understand that what they're doing is working exactly opposite to their desire to get the truth. Give me the truth. Give me this truth. It's like, oh, okay, sure. You sound so great to say the truth to right now.
Yeah.
So, and then I would say, you know, again, finding out that there's been contact maintained, like we've found that out after there was a promise to let that go, that's been a pretty major misstep that we've had to clean up after
Right.
the truth. So this is just an example, but
Yeah.
there are
That's a
many.
great example. I'd say too, on the hurt party, they'll shut down any contact, like you can't even message them anymore. And that creates issues too, where like, well, this person needs to say goodbye. This person needs to say, you know, my spouse or partner knows we're in a process, I'll reach out or I won't reach out. And, you know, there's things that get messy there too.
Yeah, we advocate for a letter of closure. We
Yeah.
actually provide a template to clients, and we encourage that the unfaithful partner actually writes it and sends it in front of the hurt partner as a gesture to show their commitment, but also honor the fact that this was a human and not a robot. And
Exactly.
at the very, very least, they deserve closure on that front.
Yeah.
There's so many things I want to say about everything you've just said, but I want to see if we want to go back and answer the original question, which was, what is infidelity? How are we defining that respectively amongst us?
Oh, well, that wasn't the question. Is how do we heal from it? Do you want
Oh,
us
but
to do
I think
that?
originally I remember
Yeah.
we had talked about that. Like, do we want to define it? You know, what is it specifically? 'Cause,
Rewind the tape.
yeah, I'm really curious about what each of you will
No,
say
it's
in
a
response to
great,
that
it's a
question.
great question. Define the terms. Yeah. Do you want to start, Dave, actually? How do
Yeah,
you
you go
see
first.
infidelity?
Yeah, I mean, I see it as any kind of relationship that's extraneous or outside of a relational container, especially an attachment-based relational container that's not transparent, where there's no consent, where the person inside the original container who doesn't know or have any knowledge of that relationship outside of it is really, in the sense, being betrayed by the commitment. So I think my definition is pretty simplistic. I imagine that you all might have more nuance that's interesting to add, but for me, it's really starts and stops with that question of consent. Is there some kind of, and it can be sexual or emotional or both, right? In terms of the kind of intimacy that's happening with someone else outside of the container of a relationship.
Do you want to go, Jess?
Yeah, I mostly would go with that. I think what I've even come to do is it doesn't matter what I think infidelity is. When people come to me, now I'm just like, you think there was an infidelity.
Mm,
Why? And
mm,
it's obvious if it's we didn't have an agreement that we could be with other people and my partner went and had sex with someone else. But a lot of people feel like a certain level of emotional intimacy is a form of infidelity, and understanding why within that container of that relationship it was a betrayal. I think that's what's most important. But what's also interesting is obviously dealing with so many non-monogamous folks, we have cheating there too, and people don't realize that can happen. Cheating also happens in non-monogamy because if we're keeping a relationship, sexual or romantic, secret, and it's unknown and it's not consensual, in some ways it can feel even harder because you're like, wait a minute, you're actually allowed to be with other people. And so, like, why would you then cheat or keep it a secret and lie about this connection? So it can have a kind of twist to it that's a little harder to work with.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How I would define, just on that note about it happening in non-monogamy, because this can make eyebrows raise, is it's anything, it's a breaking of anything explicitly stated. The gray area is the breaking of implicit expectations, agreements, or rules. So even in non-monogamy, you know, a lot of people, the way I was indoctrinated into it is I was kind of consenting to a gigantic class of behavior,
Mhm.
not very specific guardrails for a specific kind of container. And I want to encourage people in the non-monogamy spectrum, by consenting, you are not consenting to every single thing that can happen in that
In
outside of
any
monogamy.
relationship, or yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You are not consenting to that. It should be discussed. You should have agreements and they should be adjusted and addressed. But anyway, for normal infidelity, I define it as an action or series of actions that, with knowledge, breaks some kind of explicit agreement, possibly breaks implicit agreements as implied by a certain relational container. Both people are pretty sure that that's what they've opted into. Someone gets married in a church, they've never discussed openness. It's pretty implied that that is a monogamous container and relationships with other people are not
It's
allowed.
off limits. Yeah.
Right. The reason why I call it an action or series of actions is because the definition of infidelity is ever expanding, which is why my market is growing. But it's also getting really complicated because now infidelity is hearting an attractive woman on social media. It's having dinner with a person of the opposite sex. It's, porn
Right.
that we didn't watch together and I didn't know. Like it's getting easier and easier to cheat on people,
Mm.
Yeah.
which I think is creating a lot of anxiety and a lot of shadows to cause people to do unfaithful behavior. And when I use that term, I don't mean any sort of judgment. There's no religious context there for me. It's more, I wasn't faithful to the agreements that we pretty clearly had,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
So that's what it is for me. And that's why it can apply to any relationship construct, in my
Right.
opinion, because if you kind of know, if you're like, I kind of know that if I would feel uncomfortable telling my partner this today and we'd probably have a big blowout, I'm probably breaking the law somewhere.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I look at it.
So it's really a question of intention there, sort of a sense of if I think it's going to cause conflict in the relationship or some kind of attachment issue and I'm avoiding processing it, there's an intention to hide something and avoid transparency.
Yeah. And the way that I turn this around to people, because sometimes people need to be reminded of how hurt their partner is by it. And I'll say, if you imagined finding out that your partner did everything you did, and I want you to think about everything that you did with some other attractive person, of the opposite sex, how would you feel? And then they're often kind of like stunned into, like, you can see it in their face, and they knew.
Yeah.
That's how you know that they knew. But
I'm
we are
careful
all
with that logic though, because
okay.
sometimes I present that and the person's like, I'd be fine. I'd be happy. And so I always say, and a lot of partners try to do that. How would you feel if I did this to you? And they try to use that as leverage. Really, what they're trying to get is empathy.
Right.
And it doesn't always work. Sometimes it does. Sometimes the person slows down, they step into their partner's shoes and go, oh shit, I'd be devastated too. But I like to say it doesn't matter if they would be hurt if you did it back. You're hurt that they did it now. Like, we don't need to tit for tat the betrayal.
Mm.
I like that a
Yeah.
lot. The way that I'll sort of gauge whether that question will even be effective
Right.
is I'll often ask people what they think of monogamy, the unfaithful partner, especially if it's a repeated pattern. I'll ask them, what do you think about monogamy?
Right.
What are your thoughts on that? This thing that you haven't been able to do yet. I don't say that, but I'll gauge their reaction. Sometimes they're like, what do you mean? Of course, only monogamy, or it's the only way I'll be in a relationship, even though they were just cheating with someone.
Right.
And so that's how I kind of know they're in this double bind somewhere where there are parts that are just totally not in communication with each other. And that other question might have a little more success of
Yeah.
gaining empathy. But I would imagine in the open sphere, it doesn't consistently land if one person's just more comfortable with that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask a question about really, because I love that tagline that you have about shame-free process around infidelity. And it's such an easy thing to stigmatize, and it's such an obvious betrayal on so many levels. And we're socialized to see it as one of the worst possible things in a relationship. And so I'm really curious about what are the specific elements of your process that make it shame-free? Like, how are you bringing and incorporating that into your work specifically?
Yeah.
Great question. So I have a three-phase process that I work with, a process that wraps around the Gottman method. Those are like the steps that relate directly to infidelity. But with all of my clients, because I do work outside of infidelity too, sometimes I need a break. That is more the process about the stages of repair that we're taking the people through. So,
Mm.
and that process is called, get ready, Jess, for
Yeah.
alliteration, excavate, renovate, elevate.
Oh, it's a rhyme. That's not
Or
an
rhyming. Oh, yeah,
alliteration, but I
there you
love
go.
rhymes too. I'll take it. Tell us what these steps are.
Yeah. So excavating, the first step of the process, and this is the first place that we try to alleviate, we can't eradicate, but alleviate shame, is we take a really deep inventory of who each person is and begin their training on their nervous system and how to regulate themselves better in conflict. So this is about really stabilizing the situation so they don't blow each other up, but also beginning to map using the trauma tree, which Dave mentioned before. That is a visual inventory I take of the specific injuries they've acquired throughout their life that have caused certain types of wounds to be bigger than others and really influence their behavior. For example, the hurt partners who struggle the most with this were betrayed early on or throughout their lives, and it's a repeating story that they are continuously hurt by. So betrayal is one of the branches of the tree that is very powerful for them. For the unfaithful partner, that defensiveness that is like a signature of that role often had C, control trauma, and E, enmeshment trauma. So they had very enmeshed families with poor boundaries and, they were controlled a lot. So they have this like freedom fighter part that showed up during this thing and says, look how free I am. I'm going to do this. And so when we introduce people to understanding that this affair began the day they were both born, that all of the experiences they've accumulated throughout their life have culminated in this series of behaviors and breakdown. That's the first way that we begin to soften shame. The idea that they're bad, they're stupid, they're foolish, they're slut. There's a lot of slut shaming that we have to overcome. And so I keep a really clean office space when I do couples work, which is really hard when they are in this state. I have an absolute no disrespect, no degradation zone. This is not allowed. And they have to start turning the kaleidoscope lens to stop seeing this as a moral failure and a character flaw and all of these severe indictments of a person's value or validity, and rather that they are navigating serious human dilemmas that millions and millions of people are struggling through every single year. I think 20 million affairs are discovered every year. It's a lot.
A lot.
And that if we see the wounded inner children, the wounded inner parts that orchestrated this, that did not know how else to solve certain problems other than to take an opportunity to step outside, that's when we start to alleviate shame. And sometimes I actually do more work with the involved or unfaithful partner, which is interesting for me because I've never been in that role. But I find something really healing and powerful about being one of the first people in their lives to not condemn them as a horrible person, as a monster, these names that they call themselves, that other people call them. Because I found that the more shame gets to persist, the more likely this is to happen again.
Yeah, shame breeds secrecy.
Ooh,
Yeah.
You like that?
that's a tattoo.
Yeah. I'm curious about, because that's really, I love that you're talking about really excavating the historical precedents of a person's lived experience and how those contribute to very real patterns, deep-seated patterns that then emerge in these contexts where obviously choices are made and we're not trying to eschew personal responsibility, but it's not out of nowhere. It doesn't happen in a vacuum, a moral vacuum in particular. But I'm curious if you find or bring into your work explicitly some of the social influences that make transparency hard. Because in a lot of ways, I think for our attachment systems, this question of I avoid telling the truth, even when it comes to desires, right? Because it could create some kind of attachment rupture. Conflict will end the relationship. So I can't be real about what's true for me. And so I'm curious about the social narratives or the sort of the predominant social influences that you see playing into the question of infidelity. And do you talk about that in the way that that really conditions people to avoid being transparent?
Oh, now you're talking my jam.
Right.
I'm
The
going for it.
zooming out is the stuff that I really, really love because I love root cause resolution, but
Yeah,
we can't stop at the people for
right.
the root cause. As you know, Jessica, with your nested model of attachment,
Right.
it's expansive and layered out to a global scale that we're
Yeah.
influenced by, right? So in the trauma tree, just super quick, so it does makes more sense. The idea is that the trauma tree is this structure in each person's subconscious that's buried deep in this like subterranean space,
Mm,
and it holds all of the childhood trauma or even the early adult trauma and adverse programming we've been exposed to. The idea is if we have this lawn up at the top that represents our behavior, our thoughts, feelings, actions, and words, we can either have positive behaviors like a nice date. We did good at work today. We had a good thought about ourselves, right? That's like planting beautiful things on the lawn. We have a nice, orderly lawn. But what grows on a lawn that's not so beautiful and orderly?
weeds.
Weeds, exactly. So weeds represent the negative behaviors and thoughts that we have. So, oh, I'm a piece of shit because I screwed up at work, or a big fight that we had today, or an infidelity is a patch of weeds, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is we tend to focus on the surface level and we focus on the behaviors as the problem. You're lying. Stop lying. Just stop lying. That's the problem,
And then there would be a solution if you just
which is
stop
to
lying.
stop,
Right.
which has never worked. But anyway, so we tend to pull the weeds out or spray them. We focus on the surface. But why then do they come back worse? in a few weeks. This is my lawn, I'm talking about my real lawn, which inspired this, is because they are actually part of this one very interconnected, tangly root system that propagates the more you try to rip things out or attack the surface. And the root system is going down to this tree, which is fueling, for me, the vast majority of the negative behaviors that you see humans do. Yes, unmet needs is a driver, but it's how people's trauma make them deal with their unmet needs that I see they're dealing with as weeds. So the idea is the branches is an acronym for the types of wounds that we take on. Betrayal, rejection, abandonment. There's two ways: abandonment, attack, violation, neglect, control, humiliation, enmeshment, and scarcity. It's great to be human, right?
Yeah, we can experience all these things.
I know. Welcome. So the branches hold that wounding and the thoughts and beliefs and burdens, to use a parts work term. To go to your question, Dave, the soil are the societal paradigms, programs, models, and belief systems that we're indoctrinated into that divorce us from how our human nature is wired to get our needs met. And so I was actually, when I was reading your incredible latest book, Transforming the Shame Triangle, you guys literally wrote a chapter out exactly the way I was writing it for my book, all about the different models and societal influences: capitalism, patriarchy. Patriarchy is probably the biggest one that I see influencing infidelity. There's, in every client case I've worked with, maybe except one, I've dealt with major sexual intimacy breakdowns because at some point the wife stopped feeling like a woman and started feeling like a human blow-up doll or a DoorDash sex delivery service that had to be on demand. And the man has had this patriarchal belief that your wife is there to provide you sex on demand whenever you want. And the more you demand it, the more she'll give it, which is the opposite of what actually happens. And so I'm dealing with a lot of that. And so I have to gently clue people into some of these forces.
Yeah.
And I have to be especially careful about very religious. A lot of couples are pretty religious. And I have to be careful walking that line to not undermine their belief and devotion, but also name where there are aspects that are causing shame constructs for them that are not going to help them heal. You know, they'll be like, we need to run to church to figure this out. Our pastor's going to tell us how to fix this. And I'm like, I don't know that you're going to find answers about how to talk about sex there, which is the only thing distinguishing your marriage from any other relationship that you
In your
have.
life, most likely.
You know, so lots of influences there, David. Another one that I point out, just to close, is that I do believe human relating and nervous system regulation is the most colossal human educational gap in existence.
Truth.
And it is threatening our species.
Truth.
That this is the root. That's one of the roots that I see. And that's why I'm so education focused. Instead of wagging my finger, I tell them, you didn't know. No one told you this, and that is not your fault, but it is your responsibility now to fix this.
Yeah, which isn't fair. It's not fair.
It's not fair.
Yeah.
It's not.
I want to ask a question, and I hope it's not too much of a, if it feels like it's too much of a cul-de-sac, we can.
Well, I think let's finish the last two steps because we have excavation and Leah.
That's
if you
right.
could go
That's
through
right.
the next two, and we can close, like, how do you actually deal with infidelity?
Yeah, that's right.
Sure. So it's kind of like two-layered. Those steps are kind of the phases of taking a person and a relationship and actually reformatting them, basically. I used to be in software programming, and there's some influences there. So as I'm going through the checklist of these different steps using the Gottman method, I'm also superimposing the trauma tree, taking the inventory, helping each person track how their patterns show up. In the renovate stage, that's when I start helping them implement new communication skills and new ways of talking to each other. Basically, again, that whole piece is how do we stop conflict avoidance,
Hmm.
right? And in order to stop conflict avoidance, we have to stop toxic conflict, which is the precursor to conflict avoidance.
Mm.
And that's hard. And so
Yeah.
there's a lot of work there where I'm turning back to the inventory to help people remember that you feeling like you don't matter and that you have no say in things, that started a long time ago. And then we have to also figure out how to not reenact that here. In that phase, I do a lot of implementation of Gottman's 7 principles of making marriage work. Everyone listening, please buy this book. Please buy this book.
You don't
Please.
have to be married either for
You
this
don't
book
have
to
to be
be
married.
helpful. Yeah.
It should say relationship, but
Yeah. Mhm.
it's the user manual. It's like, if you want to not have to figure this out on your own and read nothing else, do these 7 things, do these magic 6-hour practices at the end of the book, your relationship will transform. Now, you would think that I would lose customers if I tell people just read a book and fix it, but I can't tell you how hard it is to get people to implement these principles
Yeah.
because their trauma is telling them things that get in the way. One quick example. The number one principle I tend to see not happening well that caused a lot of problems is number 4, let your partner influence you. So as we are facing this whole manosphere tradwife movement coming to the fore, where we're going back to the 50s and men should lead and women should be quiet and in the kitchen and all that, this is running counter to one of the most determining factors in a marriage. Gottman science shows that if a partner does not let their partner influence them, at least show that they respect their opinion, that they want their advice, all of that, he can predict their divorce at 81%.
Mm.
Yeah.
And with patriarchy, there's this whole, oh, the man, I should lead, and I'm not a man if I let my wife influence me. And I have found so many problems related to that. So in Renovate, we deal with implementing the 7 principles. Sometimes, though, we have to go back to phase 1 to figure out why mainly the husbands struggle. It's generally husbands, but it does go both ways, to figure out where they received programming that told them not to let them influence. So quick thing there. And then I love Elevate because this is where my analyst programmer side comes out. This is where I help them implement a new relationship operating system. And so I think relationships should be run more like companies than just random behaviors. Check-ins, agreements, something called the trust building agreement I help them implement. It's an emotional safety prenup that they should have had at the beginning, would have prevented a lot of problems. In Infidelity, we changed that to a trust rebuilding agreement. But then that becomes their trust maintenance building agreement over time. What does their container look like? What does monogamy look like? Are we clear? Do we agree on what that actually looks like? Sometimes they've never even mentioned the word in their
Right.
relationship, and yet that's been the greatest organizing principle
Yeah.
of their container. We put in things like, are they committed to getting monthly couples work to make sure they don't fall off track, individual work to deal with traumas that are still coming up? So I want to put a lot of rigor and organization, household roles, parenting roles, like all of this is a mess by the time they've gotten to me. And so I just want to make it organized and make roles explicit to prevent things like mental, psychic contracts, unspoken expectations that cause so many of the risk factors.
How long
And then
do
you
partners typically work with you?
had that
Like
question too, right?
what's
How
kind of the
long?
trajectory? Is there an average, or do you offer packages, or like what
Yeah,
can partners expect when they come to you and sign on for a process like this?
sure. So I typically was working with like an 8, session package and then implementing a lot of this stuff. But what I'm moving to is a much more structured private or agreement that's hopefully engagement that's probably going to move to group at some point in the future.
Mm.
But the idea is the rock solid relationship blueprint is for now a private way of getting all of the steps that I just mentioned, where I'm like doing weekly education plus private coaching. We're developing documents. They're getting assessments. They're really seeing like homework. They're seeing actual progress rather than just what's up this week, which is sort of the other normal phase. That is a 12-week process. When it comes to infidelity, I slow things down a bit because that's a very condensed timeline to be working through all of that. And I'm
Yeah.
usually spending just, the first couple months on just stabilizing.
Yeah.
That process is more spread out over like 6, 9, 12 months. And
Yeah.
it really depends on the couple. Sometimes a couple is really ready to heal and they just need a couple healing things and proper conversation skills, and boom, they're great. Others are stuck at the 18-month mark, and then we have to look at other options. But I would say that's an average.
That's good. That's good to hear.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It's not forever. It's not
It-
forever.
It's not forever, but it's also not quick.
No.
I let people know this isn't a quick fix, nor should it be, because I love what you're saying. Like this began the day you were born, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's going to take more than. Sometimes people ask me, how many sessions is it going to take to fix this?
Yeah.
Right.
And
Right.
that's
And I'm
not
like,
the right mindset here, right? It's going to take as many as it needs.
yeah,
Yeah, it's sort of similar with the responsible party. They're like, how many times do I have to apologize? And what I've noticed is the couples that make it through is that when their own answer is, I'll apologize as many times as I need to, there's something embodied in that says, I am staying accountable, even if it takes years.
that's right.
Yeah.
It's not a
Yeah.
one and done. Repair
It's
is
not
not
a
a one
one
and
and
done.
done. Right. Yeah.
And that's
Okay.
just, again, another signal of the conflict avoidance pattern that probably helped
Yes.
orchestrate it. And that's where that needs to be rehabilitated, because I do end up with another pitfall they tend to fall into is trying to rush their hurt partner through healing. Can't
Exactly.
you just let this go? It's time to move on. I've moved on. It's time
Right.
to move
Get
on. And
over it.
her partner's still in the ICU, bleeding out and in pain because their partner just ran them over with the car. But the partner's like, hey, can you get out of bed already? Because I'm ready to live life. And they're
That was
like,
6 months ago.
yeah.
Yeah.
What are you
And they're
worried about?
like, I'm sorry, I'm not ready. I'm so glad you're ready to move on from this, from a choice you made, but I didn't consent to that choice. And this is a portal where a person really needs to learn how to grow up parts of themselves and start working on things like eternity thinking, which is a very common pattern that I try to train people out of, where they take what's happening in this moment. My hurt partner is distraught. They're never going to forgive me. This is going to be my life forever, blah, blah, blah. And then they stamp that out until the end of time,
Right.
not recognizing things can pass. But what I tell them is every single time you tell them to move on and they're not ready, every time you won't answer a question, every time you don't apologize, you are pushing the finish line
Right.
back. I know
Yeah.
you think you're bringing it closer, but it's going further.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay. I'm wondering if Dave, if you and I want to answer the how we deal with
Yes,
infidelity.
I'd love to hear that.
Yeah.
Sure.
I can go through it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and if you can tailor it to the original question, I think that would be useful as a way to kind of bring us into the finish
Mm-hmm.
line.
Yeah, well, in terms of just what is the healing from infidelity, what does that process actually look like? So we have a beautiful example with Leah.
Mhm.
I think of it as what, why, and how. So first, we're just what happened, and that's sort of the truth you were talking about, Leah, and not doing this truth trickling and pieces of the truth keep coming out. So really, what happened so that we're both on the same reality? Because often the affair, the infidelity, it's sometimes not the acts that are as painful as the ruptured and shared reality. I thought we were living in one reality as partners, and it was fake or it was false. And that's what can really be so disorienting. So we need to get back in reality of what happened. That can doesn't have to take as long. The why is what usually takes the longest.
Mm.
And it's why did this happen? So for the responsible party, yeah, what led you to this? And it's similar to what you're getting to, Leah, of what were the past traumas, what are the social and cultural constructs at play. But why did you do this? Because when someone just says, I don't know, their partner is never going to be able to trust that. If you don't know why you did this, how do I know you're never going to do this again? Or, right?
Mm.
And the phase two of the why will become what in the relationship didn't cause my partner to cheat, but contributed to the environment that they would then choose to cheat, right? Because it's rarely just one partner in a vacuum cheating. It usually is a culture of the relationship and, like you're saying, the conflict avoidance. But in this why, we're doing a lot of parts work. And what I am finding across the board is that in the responsible party, they have usually a teenage part that did the cheating. It's
Mm.
usually this younger, more adolescent, still in sort of like my desires, my wishes, the things I never got to express or have, the desires I never got to have or have. And that is the part that stepped outside of the relationship. And what's fascinating is when we work with that part, a lot of times that part doesn't even know about the partner on some level. Yeah, like I'll be like, ask
Wow.
that, do they know that you're in a marriage? And then like this part doesn't even know that I'm a full adult or doesn't even know I'm in a marriage, or they kind of know that this other person's there, but they're pissed that there's like rules on them about it. So there's a lot
Wow.
of updating, like fragmentation in someone's system and sort of updating of many parts that bring them into more coherence of what is my current life and reality and how to be more self-led. Yeah. And then the how is, how do we trust again? How do we build a new relationship and what needs to happen? How do we move forward? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll
Mm.
use that as a segue for my answer. And, I think one of the things that creates a sense of safety and trust is knowing that a partner is aware of these parts, right? And so I agree that from a parts
Mm.
perspective, there is no way to create trust and safety that this won't happen again if a partner isn't aware that this kind of behavior, infidelity, is driven by parts. And so, really using parts semantics, parts language, having individuals be ambassadors for their parts and be able to say, I
Mm.
can see when they're active. I can see when they're struggling with something or triggered and wanting something in particular and can communicate that and be transparent about that. Obviously, the partner has to be able to receive that well versus just losing their mind and going, holy shit, I can't believe this part is even living in you anymore. Why can't you get rid of that part of yourself? Like
Right.
that has to be received well for that to be able to be a safe thing to say. But really, there's a lot of safety that can start to be cultivated when you start to see a partner is aware of these mechanisms that drive this behavior. I think the other part that I would add is the question of attachment needs. And this is really going back
Yeah.
to what is it that parts are trying to get for you? Because they're always trying to leverage something in your benefit. And it's usually attached to some experience that wasn't allowed at an earlier part in their lives. So if we think about this rebellious teenage part that's driving a lot of infidelity for a lot of people, what are the experiences that we imagine, right? What are the needs that are underneath an imagined experience, right? That they've never gotten potentially, or have felt blocked from, or don't feel accessible in the current relationship. So, really wanting people to have the capacity to help their parts recognize the specific needs. And it's often this question of needs that really brings a lot of the juice to these repair processes with partners. Wow, I had no idea that one, this need was not being met or driving me or driving these parts? And why is it that these needs can't be talked about or negotiated? Is it a social thing like religion, family of origin? What are the factors, larger factors that make it impossible, seemingly, to not have the space to even consider these needs getting met in the context of a relationship? So those are two things that feel really key for me is just knowing that a partner can speak for their parts and then what are the needs that are driving a part's behavior. But I'm really questioning, Leah, I could talk to you all day. There's so many things that have come
I
up.
know.
Like
We have
your
three
I
hours.
know.
your system's so comprehensive and so practical and
Thanks.
so well constructed. And there's so many facets of things that you said that I want to tackle. We're not going to get to them, but I do want to end with a consideration of this question because for me, it's a really kind of juicy polemic. Can and should we advocate as professionals for a process like this person's bringing to us in this question, right? Is it tenable to go through a repair process while the other person is still seeing the person with whom they've cheated?
Let's do a round robin on that one.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Do you want to start, Leah?
sure. I would say, in the absence of one of the key healing steps, the primary step would be to make sure the hurt partner feels empowered, because that's the key of the atonement. The hurt partner's power has been taken away. They are a victim, whether we believe in that word or not, and they must be re empowered. And that is hard to do if they really don't want A, non monogamy, and B, non monogamy with the person that they were betrayed by. So it has to be as empowering as possible. They would need a very specific trust rebuilding agreement that focuses on highly trustworthy behaviors that are outside that person not seeing them. Now, I would not put an indefinite end date on that inquiry.
Yeah.
I would have it be a defined, I think you called it a vessel in Polysecure. I would create a vessel around it. I would create a finite time period where the hurt partner is having deep individual support, professional support paid for by the partner. They should not have to subsidize their own stability while their partner is doing something that they did not sign up for. And the trustworthy behaviors that I guess now open partner is required to demonstrate, they need to really nail it. They need to take it extremely seriously and not fall down on the job. They need to show they can be trusted in every other area except being monogamous. And the her partner has to decide every day, it has to be a conscious choice every day to lean into the idea of releasing the concept of monogamy as the security blanket or failsafe that they have relied on their whole lives. And they get to opt out. I want to make sure they know how to take care of themselves if this ultimately doesn't work, because I know firsthand what can happen when you stay in a traumatizing situation for too long. It has long-term effects, and people deserve to not be traumatized long-term in the name of love.
I love that.
Thank you, Leah.
Phew.
Yeah. Well said. Well said.
Dave, you want to go? You want me to go?
Yeah, I'll go. I'm just gonna speak in terms of what I've seen in my work in
Yeah,
terms of
great.
percentages, right? The odds, the probabilities, all right? Because I don't want to talk about should or shouldn'ts. And what I've seen is the overwhelming majority is it won't work. It doesn't work. Like when the person's still in the relationship with whom they've had the affair, it doesn't work. The transition
Yeah.
can't happen. It usually ends up in the disillusionment of the original relationship. And it makes sense to me why. I will say though, I've seen
Mhm.
one exception, and this is why I say it's not about it can't happen. It can. But in that exception, it was interesting. The person who was the external person, right? The person
Their
that
partner.
the extra partner, the partner who wasn't a partner, the person who wasn't a partner, right? was willing to come and be part of the repair process. So
Yes.
everyone was explicitly part of that repair process. And so that person who was, with the partner cheating came in, talked to the harmed party, or in this case, the hurt partner, and was really took atonement, took accountability. There was conversations. I mean, it was a really intimate process between all three people, and that's the only reason why I think that worked. And there's no
Mm,
guarantee that it would work even if you did that. But that
right.
was a unique factor because that's a big ask too for that other person to come in and really face the heat of the person who's really felt betrayed. So I'll just say that typically it doesn't work, but I have seen an exception.
So, Dave, are you saying it's important to set people's expectations pretty low
Yeah,
so that they're not massively
abs
disappointed? Okay,
absolutely. I'm
that's
saying to
fair.
people, that's what I say to people is
Okay.
I have only seen this work once. You are working uphill, and I think that's
Mm,
a way to encourage them to say, it's not advisable, but if you're really wanting to try this, it's going to take a ton of work. So you have to be ready
Mm.
for one, for it not to work and still be willing to put your all into it. But I think it's a tremendously difficult thing to try to do.
agreed.
I agree. I tell people in the ideal situation, well, I say this, I say opening up under um, stable conditions, non-hurt conditions, is extremely difficult and takes time. And recovering after there's been infidelity is something that is extremely difficult and takes time. Like, do you have the capacity and bandwidth to do both of these? But I say to people, if it's up to me, you wouldn't be with that other person and we would stabilize with a fair repair, is what I say. And that has to take as long as it takes, right? And then as partners, you can discuss, do we to want to open up the relationship or not? Is that our trajectory? Is that our
Mm,
how, we're going to be moving forward?
mhm.
I've seen a few cases where that has happened, right? And the only times I see that happen is when the hurt person is someone who's kind of interested in non-monogamy themselves. Like they see the benefit of it or they kind of want it too. So they get why their partner in a different way because they're like, oh, I think we both actually are more non-monogamous. So it makes sense for us to move in that direction. I have not seen that work once when the harmed person wants nothing to do with non-monogamy. It
Mm.
just, yeah, I've yet
Yeah.
to see it work. I do have a couple that have come to me later in their process and they've already integrated the third person, and made new agreements with her. But now it's sort of catching up. Like there can really be, we didn't name this yet, but there can be a delayed reaction because sometimes the hurt person actually quickly is just going into appease. I don't want to
Mm,
lose my partner. I don't want to lose my family. I don't want to lose my stability, my security, right, on a structural level. So I'm just going to say yes to make this okay. And now, a year or two down the road, they're realizing none of this is okay with me, actually. And, I've just been appeasing with a yes. So it's hard to tease that apart, too.
Yeah, and you're also exposing to the question, which I'm sad we didn't get to, the of power differentials.
ugh.
Like when you've
Episode
got
two.
someone, yeah, when the person who's been cheated on is dependent
Is
economically on the person
financially,
who cheated,
Yeah.
like
exactly.
that's an even harder thing to factor in.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, right.
Well,
Hmm.
in the
Okay.
third phase, quickly, in the third
Yeah.
phase, even if they're not going through infidelity, part of what I implement is financial interdependence
Mm,
agreement
mm,
so that should something bad happen like this,
Fantastic.
no one should have to make a decision to traumatize themselves or betray themselves, because that's what the hurt partner is really experiencing. Immense self betrayal by staying, that they should not have to worry about survival in terms of leaving a relationship that's hurting them. In an ideal world.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've recently learned about the phrase, we all know about prenup, but there's postnups. There's actually
Yep.
legal agreements you can bring into play to support some of these imbalances.
Yeah. Well, I love it.
Yeah.
What was the thing that you said about emotional prenup? There was something about what did you say about that quickly? That was really cool.
So, yeah, so the trust building agreement or trust rebuilding agreement in infidelity case is a series of written clauses about first, if it's rebuilding, the steps that the unfaithful partner is committing to taking every day to demonstrate new trustworthiness. But if it's just a pure building agreement, it's how do we agree to speak to each other? And if that's not happening, how do we get help? If we have a fight 3 times and we can't resolve it, do we get help? Like the idea is no implementing the magic 6 hours from the Seven Principles book, the weekly practice of appreciation, tracking your partner, a weekly check-in, so that there are not compiling resentments over months or years that then lead to stuff like this. So I call it emotional safety prenup because it determines how are we going to create emotional safety and significance, the two driving needs, I think, of a lot of people's behavior. How do we keep our eye on that all the time so that if we're afraid of, if we're having an insecure or jealous moment, instead of going, am I enough? Am I enough? Which is such a weird statement. It's, are we doing enough to realistically, feasibly create monogamy we can trust?
That's the bomb. I love that. That's so good.
Yeah, I love that people question, am I enough? Or they project it out. Is my partner enough? Are they doing enough?
Yep.
Instead of actually, are we doing enough together?
Are we a team
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
monogamy thing?
Yeah. I love that. That's amazing. Leah's been amazing.
We
Yeah.
love you, Leah.
Yeah, you are
I think
such
our listeners are going to really appreciate this. Thank
such
you.
a light, such a light in
Thanks.
this field. I'm so excited for your clients
Thank you.
and for anyone that comes across you. And I hope that this helps bring more people across your path. Anything that you want to say right now in terms of how people can find you, and we can also put this in the show notes as well, but just want to give you a chance to plug whatever you want to plug now.
Absolutely. So if people want to find me, I'm at leadawnlove.com, and I'll give you the link. I just launched a new assessment called What's Your Fight Type? Because
Yeah.
I'm hell-bent on eliminating conflict, toxic conflict. And this looks at your fight personality, your conflict personality, and how it interacts with your partner. That actually leads to a workshop that I'm planning on teaching monthly to teach a very quick nervous system intervention method to stop a spiral from going out of control so that people don't shut down and avoid conflict. So that would be a great way for people to find me there. And I just want to say, I know I've said this before, but the light that you two bring to this world, I mean, your writings, your appearances, your words have, I think, dramatically transformed the relational sphere. And there's so many people that you don't know you have positively influenced. And I'm just so grateful to know you guys, like immensely grateful.
Thank you, Leah.
That's really sweet. I appreciate that. That means a lot coming from you.
Aw,
Yeah.
thanks.
All right. Well, we're
All
going to say
right.
goodbye. Thank you. And yeah, we'll see you down the road.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.